It's a mixed bag for President Donald Trump. Not only has he managed to retain the Senate for the Republicans, but they have actually gained ground. But the lower house, or the House of Representatives, has been taken over by the Democrats. So let's take a step further and take a look at what these results mean for President Trump. Retaining the Senate is a big boost for the conservative legislative agenda of the Republicans. They will focus on putting as many conservative judges on the federal bench. They've already confirmed a record number of Trump-appointed judges in the last 2 years, and that is likely to continue. Republicans can also block initiatives passed by the House by Democrats. They will try hard to stall and block just because they have the power to do so. The Republicans will also renew efforts to repeal Obamacare, the healthcare legislation they have been against since they came to power. Riding high on this victory, Trump will renew efforts to build the $25 billion Mexico wall and further tighten immigration laws, a major issue on which this election was fought. Republicans have retained the Senate, but they will now have to face a gridlocked Capitol Hill for the next 2 years as the Democrats gain control of the House of Representatives. It allows them to open investigations into Trump's finances, businesses, or tax returns. It also allows them to probe the Russia election meddling charge more aggressively against Trump and his administration. Democrats can now block Trump's conservative legislative agenda. Even routine spending bills will become a bitter fight between the two chambers. And with majority in the lower house, the Democrats will now have a solid footing to censure Trump. And those divided results are both good and bad news for Donald Trump. Here's a quick analysis detailed on what these election results mean for Trump's re-election bid in 2020.
Our projection, ABC's projection, is that the Democrats will take between 32 and 36 seats in the House, and we haven't yet projected the margin yet in the Senate, but clearly the Republicans are going to retain the Senate, probably gain at least three seats.
3, 4,
so historically speaking, can't Trump and his team make the argument that we did quite well?
Sure, and the counter argument is right as well.
What's the counter argument?
That he got wiped out across the country. You can look literally across the country in the suburbs, going from New York City right here all the way down through Philadelphia and Miami and Kansas City and Oklahoma City, and we're going to see results later in the Los Angeles area and Dallas and Houston, and suburban House members, people that were loyal to the Trump agenda, House members who were loyal to the Trump agenda, are getting punished for it. They're getting routed. They're getting wiped out, and they are powering a Democratic wave that is limited to the House. At the same time, a whole range of Senate candidates very loyal to the Trump agenda, they're getting rewarded for it. So yes, the president can declare victory, but so can Democrats. This is like 5-year-old soccer where everyone gets a trophy.
I have a 4-year-old, and he plays that kind of soccer game. But so what does it all mean heading into 2020? If I'm Donald Trump looking at the map and how I did and how his team did, is he going to be worried or excited going into 2020?
Well, he's going to look at some of the key states where his guys were able to hold. And the red states, put them aside. He was never going to realistically have to worry about the North Dakotas and the Indianas or even the Missouris of the world. But the fact that he's getting a gubernatorial candidate winning in Ohio, the fact that he's getting a gubernatorial candidate winning in Florida and may get a Senate seat there as well, that I think is his evidence that his team will say, look, our coalition holds and can be strengthened, emboldened by us continuing to go out there. So I think they can look around at that, but they have to also look at the absolute warning signs. This revolt in suburban parts of the country. Look, Democrats are going to get 8-9 million more votes than Republicans. President Trump got 2 million votes fewer than Hillary Clinton. Can you maintain a re-election strategy kind of knowing that you're going to lose the popular vote? That's a pretty dicey proposition.
And speaking of the year 2020, joining us on the broadcast this minute is Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, advisor to Donald Trump for the 2020 presidential campaign, live from Washington, D.C. Also joining us at this point is former diplomat Ambassador Arun Singh. I'll just come back to you, Ambassador, but first to Stephen Rogers. What do you think went wrong for Donald Trump when it comes to the U.S. House of Representatives, and how, according to you, does this impact his presidential run for the year 2020?
We certainly didn't expect to take control of the House. But we also didn't expect to have the gains that we got in the Senate. Now, that's very important to the president and the Republican Party because we continue to have the votes now for more Supreme Court justices and district justices as we move forward. Secondly, what is very important are the gubernatorial races in Ohio, Florida, and other states where in 2020, it'll be very important for the president to win those states. So we're pretty happy with the results. It was not the blue wave that was predicted, and hopefully the Democrats will come to their senses and they'll be thinking about negotiating with the president as we move forward on important legislation.
All right, I'll just come back to you, Stephen. Let's also take this a step further and take a look at how this result impacts U.S. foreign policy. It's, of course, established that the U.S. voters have given a split verdict. The House of Representatives is now Democrat-leaning, but the Senate remains with the Republicans, as we discussed. But what does that really mean for India? Let's remember that Donald Trump had also talked about the post-war international consensus on free trade, and Trump's nationalist economic policies have not been in favor of India per se. The U.S. president had imposed 25% tariffs on steel imports and 10% tariffs on the import of aluminium. Donald Trump has also declared tariffs on washing machines and solar panels, including those from India. Now that the House of Representatives is in favor of the Democrats, the House has the power to disrupt any such nationalist economic policies. But remember, the House's power is limited to just disruption when it comes to executive policies. The U.S. Senate still has Republican majority, and finally it is up to the president to sign any executive order. If the U.S. tries to meddle with Donald Trump's affairs, the U.S. president might be more aggressive with his ultra-nationalist policies, which of course will have its impact on the U.S. foreign affairs. In his campaign for the midterms, Donald Trump had slammed birthright citizenship. Donald Trump was not in favor of anyone being awarded U.S. citizenship just by the virtue of being born on U.S. soil. With a midterm verdict that does not look like a hurdle to Trump, the U.S. president might pass laws abolishing the practice of birthright citizenship. Even though it does not impact Indians living on Indian soil, it will be hard-hitting for those Indian expats. Trump has also been against giving jobs to non-Americans. Now that he has a referendum which is pretty much in his favor, Trump may pass fresh set of orders restricting foreigners in U.S. offices. While Trump's economic nationalism might have stung India, there's also another side to the coin. One needs to acknowledge that Trump administration has viewed India as one of its most attractive partners. High-level security conversations have sprung up in the recent years. There was the 2+2 dialogue. The United States is also framing its Asian policies somewhat in favor of India. The term it uses is Indo-Pacific. The Pentagon, too, has renamed its Regional Combatant Command accordingly, now with reference to the U.S. sanctions on Iran. Remember that the Trump administration has also recently made exceptions for India, allowing it to import oil from Iran. Let me get in Ambassador Arun Singh on that point. A lot of experts, Ambassador, have been talking about how this election has an equal impact when it comes to domestic issues and also when it comes to United States foreign policy. Where do you stand on that, and what do these split verdicts really mean for United States equation with India?
There were several comments that you made that are relevant in this context. You mentioned that this election was, in a sense, a referendum on President Donald Trump because his presidency has been very controversial. And the way he went about campaigning, he made it clear that he saw the future of his administration, his policies, as being on stake. Second, that the result is clearly a mixed bag. Again, as you pointed out, in the House, Democrats have taken over, but in the Senate, Republicans have added to their numbers. But in the election itself, the focus seemed to be much more on domestic issues and in terms of the values through which governance is done in the United States, the processes that are adopted for governance. Foreign policy issues were not really major subject of controversy during the elections. And if you look at India, there has been broad bipartisan consensus, both among Democrats and Republicans, for advancing this relationship. The new relationship between US and India really started in 2000 with the visit of the Democratic President Clinton to India. After that, the Republican President George Bush advanced it significantly by doing a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with India. This was followed up by the Democratic President Obama, who declared support for India's permanent membership of UN Security Council and declared India as a major defense partner. And then a Republican President, Trump, advanced the 2+2 dialogue with India and put India in the category of Strategic Trade Authorization Level 1, which is the level at which technologies are released by the US for its closest partners, NATO partners. Therefore, as you can see, across parties, there is support for the India relationship, which again was reflected in the fact that on Iran oil imports, India has been granted exemption, a waiver, as well as for continued use of Chabahar port for supplies related to Afghanistan. Therefore, I believe with whatever the outcome of the elections in terms of now a Democratic majority in the House and a Republican majority or strengthened Republican majority in the Senate, the relationship with India or between US and India would continue on the positive trajectory. The differences that are there now on economic issues will continue because there are differences of viewpoint, differences of positions, and whether it has been Republicans or Democrats in the White House or in the Congress, these issues have remained at the forefront. So these are issues that we would need to discuss and tackle within the framework of the overall relationship.
Indeed, and Stephen Rogers, with this verdict, do we expect Donald Trump to up the ante against illegal immigrants? Also, the issue of birthright citizenship, as we've discussed, is crucial to many Indians. Where does the president stand on that issue in time to come? Do you see him taking the step forward as he had discussed during his campaigning and signing the executive order on birthright citizenship?
Well, to begin with, the ambassador put things in very good perspective. He explained that very well. We're focused on domestic issues here, not particularly the foreign policy issues. With regard to the birthright issue and immigration, the president is going to stand his ground. The national security is one of the reasons why we need to tighten that border. With regard to birthright citizenship, the Constitution of the United States 14th Amendment is pretty clear. In fact, the individual who wrote that amendment made it clear that birthright was not intended for those who are of foreign origin and are on U.S. soil. It will be debated. I believe the Supreme Court of the United States will come down on the side of the president with regard to birthright issues. But at the end of the day, we all know President Trump is a great negotiator, and he will use his negotiating skills to ensure that wherever we deal with people around the world, it'll be in the best interest of the United States and hopefully in the best interest of peace in every region around the world.
All right, we're going to wrap it up at that point. Stephen Rogers and Ambassador Arun Singh, appreciate very much for joining us with all of those perspectives. And one of the issues that has also come up for discussion is how a record number of women were up for election this time around. 185 women contested the elections on the Democratic ticket, 75 of whom have won so far. 52 women contested the elections on the Republican ticket and 12 of them won so far. 87 out of the total of 237 women have won. That's a big number. Here's a detailed breakdown on the role that women have played in this midterm election.
You know, one of the things you wanted to talk about tonight that we haven't had a chance to really talk about is you've been tracking the performance of women tonight. What's your view?
It's pretty extraordinary. We already saw a record number of women running for office in general. You had 276 women running for House, Senate, and governor races. And the success rate has been pretty remarkable for the House of Representatives, at least. At one point, you had 10 out of 14 seats that flipped were women. A lot of these women were in suburban areas, which were districts that Republicans knew they were going to have difficulty with because independents were breaking for Democrats because they're not happy with the tone and tenor of the Trump administration. And many of these women have won in these districts and taken out some pretty significant Republican incumbents in places like Texas, in places like Pennsylvania. 3 out of the 4 seats that were won in Pennsylvania were won by women. Oklahoma City, which was a race that even George earlier said that it wasn't on the map, wasn't on the radar, we weren't paying attention to it. That was a shocker, where someone in Oklahoma City, another suburban area, woman Democrat won. So Kendra Horn. So I think that's pretty remarkable in a lot of ways, because the gender gap was pretty significant also. College-educated women voted Republican last time. This time, 20% Democrat. That is an unbelievable gender gap. Independents, in general, Trump won them 4%. This time, 12% more went to Democrats. So this is going to be a dynamic, I think, that's going to be problematic moving forward for the Trump administration as they go into the re-election in 2020. What do they do about these suburban districts? And definitely for the Republican Party, they're going to have a heart-to-heart about what they're going to do about women and independence.